Well, the man considered by many to be the front-runner for the Conservative Party leadership has also weighed in on the anti-pipeline protests. Peter MacKay has called the protesters a small gang of professional protesters and thugs, vowing that as Prime Minister, he would use every lever available to ensure these kinds of blockades don't happen again. Peter MacKay joins me now from Toronto. Mr. MacKay, good to see you again, and thanks for taking time to speak with me.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
I want to get your views to start off here on the major news of the day, the ongoing news in this country, and that's the continuing anti-pipeline protests and blockades. What would you be doing differently as Prime Minister?
Well, look, it can't go on. We are seeing right now our rail lines paralyzed. It's affecting thousands of Canadians. It's affecting critical merchandise that has to get to market. It's affecting things like propane, medicine, and it's affecting people's ability to travel. And so what I would do differently is I would expect the police to do their job. And essentially that is to clear the tracks, to make sure that people, merchandise, and services are moving.
What does that mean? You'd expect the police to do their job. Could you order the police to do their job?
Well, it's not about ordering them. It's about letting them know that they should act within their jurisdiction. And as they have in other situations, as they have when people are breaking the law, which I would suggest is what's happening here, in impeding transportation, in standing in the way of people's movements, there are rights at stake here, and the rights are of every working Canadian who has the ability to move across this country. And that is being impeded by individuals who are acting against the law. And so the expectation should be, and is, that Canadians will have their police intervene.
Right. I guess, how do you turn that? We've heard Liberal ministers say repeatedly here they don't have the authority to order the RCMP to take down these blockades. You're a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Do you agree with that position?
No, I don't. I think that there is an underlying message here that they don't want the police to do their job. They want further negotiation and restraint. And I think that that time has well passed now. We're 2 weeks into this. It's a crisis. It's causing a lot of harm to our economy. It's costing a lot of jobs. I heard that Via Rail may be laying off 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. There are other companies who are similarly looking at making decisions and possibly moving jobs and supply chains out of our country. And so the impact is real. The police are acting within their mandate to remove individuals who are impeding travel.
So what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is say you wouldn't be in a position as Prime Minister or have a cabinet minister tell the RCMP to do it, but you would be communicating you want it done, as opposed to communicating you want a peaceful resolution.
That's correct. I think it's not about ordering the police to do anything. It's about signaling clearly that you expect them to do their job.
Okay. You refer to these protesters as a small gang of professional protesters and thugs. Are you suggesting that the concerns being expressed by the Hereditary chiefs and the people who support them are not legitimate?
Not at all. The Wet'suwet'en people have spoken, and in fact the majority speaking through their elected band members are saying that they are in favor of a pipeline. The Hereditary chiefs I would compare in some fashion to hereditary lords in the House of Lords in the UK. These are not elected representatives or voices of that band. And what we are seeing in many of these blockades, in fact, are not even Aboriginal people or Indigenous people. They're individuals who mistakenly believe that they are standing up for the rights of these bands, who I have just explained are quite pro-pipeline in this instance. And so there is a tremendous misrepresentation that this is an Aboriginal protest in many ways. It is not. The individuals at those locations blocking the movement of goods and services in many cases are not First Nations people. But
these Hereditary chiefs, as you know, I think, these Hereditary chiefs say that their system of governance predates the Indian Act. It in fact, is the way they have traditionally made decisions. So there's this intersection of two governance issues, I guess, and the question becomes which one takes priority.
Well, Peter, I think there is one law for all Canadians. That's what I believe.
Okay. One last question on this. This government has set an expectation for reconciliation with Indigenous people that includes more say in whether or how major energy projects go ahead, an expectation that there's to be this new relationship between federal governments and Indigenous peoples. And it seems to me that's part of why this is so problematic for the federal government. So how much of a priority would reconciliation be under your leadership?
Well, just to go back to the first part of that, I think that nobody can now believe that the efforts of this government have been successful. In fact, I think they've been an abject failure. All evidence to the contrary in terms of having moved forward with reconciliation. We have now a flashpoint where we are seeing the country paralyzed in many ways in terms of their ability to move forward on transportation issues, or in fact on some of these issues that stem from reconciliation efforts. A government that I would lead, a government that I would engage in these discussions, would not be held hostage and would not be predicated on removing projects from lands that, in fact, the Aboriginal people who were elected in those lands are supporting. So we're sort of parsing a number of different issues here,
right.
But I come back to the fact that no one is above the law, and no one should be able to hold the government or the people of Canada hostage because of demands that are yet to be settled and yet to be reconciled. So those discussions can certainly continue, but not with a gun to the head of the Canadian government and the Canadian people.
All right, let's talk now about your quest to be a Conservative leader. Are you surprised at how so few prominent Conservatives want that job?
Well, it's you say prominent Conservatives. There are members of the party who are running, and there are individuals.
Yeah, and I don't mean to diminish there, but I mean,
No.
well, let me phrase it another way. How many well-known Conservatives that people have come to know over the years don't seem interested in going after this job?
Well, I would look at it differently. I think some of the names, certainly Ron Ambrose, John Baird, others who have dipped their toe in the water initially, have decided for personal reasons which I can understand, where they were in the private sector or they were in politics for a significant period of time, have simply decided that this is not the time to do it. I went through that process and understand quite personally what it means. There's family considerations, financial considerations. Simply having returned to the private sector, it is a big leap to go back to politics. And so I think for each individual, it's a very considered and thoughtful decision that has to be made based on a whole number of factors.
You and the other candidates who have thrown their hats in the ring here have talked about the need to modernize the Conservative Party to win the voters the party didn't get last time. What does modernize mean to you?
Well, modernize to me means, quite frankly, having a thoughtful and detailed, serious plan to address climate change and issues around the environment. It means accepting that Canadian society has evolved. I'm pro-choice. I believe that marriage is marriage, and we need to accept people. And I think a modern Conservative Party in its policies, but in every fashion, has to reflect that modernity. And so I believe that bringing forward policies that, yes, promote fiscal responsibility, promote rule of law, promote a strong military, promote Canada's role in the world, but also is more moderate and inclusive, is the type of party that I would want to lead.
Does a climate change plan, a credible climate change plan, in your view, need to include a carbon tax?
No, it doesn't. I think a carbon tax, firstly, doesn't work. It's simply a license to pollute. And it is an unfair tax. It is not applied evenly. People in rural Canada don't have the options for transportation or heating their homes that people in a city like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver might have. And so I think it's putting emphasis on technology, finding real solutions. A carbon tax doesn't lower emissions.
Right. So was there, in your view, was there too much emphasis on no carbon tax in the last campaign and not enough emphasis on what Conservatives would do differently?
Peter, I think that's it. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's not just on environmental issues and social issues. It's putting more emphasis on how we would do it differently and putting those ideas front and center, putting policies in the window that I believe Canadians will find attractive as an alternative. We have now 5 years of Liberal government to compare to. It's very easy to tear down what the Prime Minister has done and the way that he has governed. But I think people are much more in tune and want to hear how a Conservative government would do it differently and what a Conservative leader would actually present as the alternative. And that's what I'm hoping to do in the course of this leadership campaign and beyond.
Candidate Aaron O'Toole says you would pull the Conservative Party closer to the Liberals. He wants to paint himself as the true blue Tory, and it seems to me paint you as the red Tory. Are you comfortable with that assessment?
Peter, let me be clear. I'm the co-founder of the Conservative Party with Stephen Harper. I served in his government. I was Justice Minister, Foreign Minister, Minister of National Defence. I'm a Canadian Conservative, and I have been my entire life. I don't think these labels, quite frankly, really apply anymore. I don't think many Canadians even understand what they mean. But look at my record, whether it be as Justice Minister on mandatory minimum penalties, whether as Minister of National Defence and re-equipping and supporting our forces. I'm proud of the time that I spent in government. But I'm not going to be labeled or put in a corner by anyone, and I'm proud of my conservative credentials, and I think that they stack up well against anybody in this race.
All right, Peter MacKay, good to talk to you. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk again as the race continues, but appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Good to speak to you as well.